So I know most of the people in this room. Of course, there are some people online, but just by way of introduction to people who don't know me, my name is Nayaswami Nitaiji. I had the incredible blessing to be one of the founding members of Ananda Village in California back in the early 1970s. I was a young man of 23 at that time, and it was meant to be. I look back and say that I was looking for something different than the regular culture offered me, and found it. Found it very close to home. So I want to share the reading today. This is from Rays of the One Light, series of readings by Swami Kriyananda based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. John, the woman of Samaria asked Jesus, "Where is the best place to worship?" This question might be expanded to include, what is the best church, the best religion? Is it important to go on pilgrimage to holy shrines? The best ritual, the best mantra or prayer? Jesus cut across all questioning with his reply. The hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in truth and in spirit. It was not that outward considerations of place, church, ritual, etc. are irrelevant. Each person should find those practices and observances which are compatible with his own nature, one might say with his own vibrations. Not everyone's natural path is the same. God sent different religions into the world to satisfy different human needs. The overarching concern, however, considering that the goal is to find God, is to include in one's worship daily inner communion with the Lord. God is silence. He must be sought, therefore, in inner silence. God is absolute love. He must be sought, therefore, in the silence of love. God is spirit and thus immaterial. He must be sought above all in the expanding peace of deep meditation. Thus, the Bhagavad Gita states in the 6th chapter, sequestered should he sit, steadfastly meditating, solitary, his thoughts controlled, his passions laid away, from every craving for possession freed. Wherever you are, whatever your outward beliefs and observances, seek God in the silence of your own soul. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. So, this topic of worship was quite interesting to me growing up. I was I was born in a place called Sacramento, California. If you've ever been to Ananda Village, you drive through it on your way up the hill to Ananda. It's about 70 miles from Ananda. I was raised in a very kind, good parents. They were Catholics, and so I was raised in the Catholic Church. And this topic of worship would come up occasionally, but it never made any sense to me. I had no idea what they were talking about. They would do things, they would wave things at the altar, they would hand out things in communion, and I just didn't know what they were doing. I just like, wow, what is this all about? It seemed like just kind of a ritual. It was an outward ritual that everybody around me was doing, and so I kind of did it, but I didn't have that, didn't have any depth. There was no depth, zero depth to it for me. I didn't know what it was about, why we were doing it. And that kind of emptiness grew as I grew up. So going through high school, it was more of the same. Only reason I was going to church at that point in my life was because of my mother, that she wanted me to go, and I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So I would go. But I have to admit, the highlight of Sunday was, for us, was driving back and stopping to get the newspaper so I could read about the sports page. It was not a peculiarly very interesting upbringing that way. But my parents were doing the best they could and with their perceptions. But I got to my university years and seriously started questioning why I would do that. And I actually, as soon as I moved away from home to go to college, I stopped going to church. And proceeded to just wonder, what is this all about? The goals that were presented to me in the university were also not ones that I could relate to. They were all about, well, you should do this because you're going to get a good income. And then, well, what would I do with a good income if I got it? Well, then you could have a nice house, you could have a nice car, you could get married, you could have children. And then why would I want to do that? Well, because then your children can raise their children, and then they can raise their children. And I thought, that doesn't sound like a very promising reason to be on this plane. So I started looking for other answers, and I had heard a little bit about Eastern teachings, enough to kind of whet my appetite. I knew that there was something called meditation. I had read about it in a Zen Buddhist manual, and actually tried a few times to meditate by just kind of gritting my mind and trying to hold my mind steady, and basically gave myself a headache. It was all that, the only thing I got out of it. But I was intrigued because they talked about it in a very interesting way. So some of you know my story, but I'll just kind of brush over it a little bit because it shows a little bit about Divine Mother's sense of humor and also her lack of interest in being frugal and not wasting energy and time. So when I finished my education, I just still didn't have any direction, didn't know what would motivate me. And I started traveling, and I finally decided I have to go find out about this meditation thing. I got to find out, what is it? Who could teach me? And so my travels took me all the way across Europe, first of all, North Africa, Europe, then across Asia, through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and eventually arrived in New Delhi. This is September 1969. Within 48 hours after I arrived in New Delhi, I had the book in my hand, Autobiography of a Yogi. I'd never heard of it before. I didn't know that I was coming for it, but just it was there. And I started reading it. And it was the most powerful book I've ever read to date. It changed my life. By chapter 4 or 5, I thought, this person is amazing. I have to find him and I have to study with him to find out what all this meditation and yoga is about. And I'll find his ashram, and I probably will never go back to the United States. And so that's chapter 4, 5. So by the time I got to, I forget what chapter it is, but the chapter where he says, I go to America in the middle of the book, I was stunned. It was like, what? He went to America? And then a couple of chapters later, what? He went to California? So I read the book and I thought, well, I need to go back to find out what this is all about. So I went all the way back around the rest of the world, got back to California, and it took about another 5 or 6 months before I found out that there was this thing called Ananda, which was starting up in the foothills, 70 miles from where I was born. I got to go up there, and first person I ran into was Jaya, and that was the beginning of my recognizing that, I had found my spiritual family. But this whole idea that I was missing growing up, there was a missing dimension. No one had ever been able to tell me in a way that I could understand. Maybe somebody tried, but nobody ever succeeded, that there's another dimension to life. There are these outer dimensions. There are the outer dimension of career and family and all these things out here, money. But there's also an inner dimension. There's an inner dimension that you can pursue. And that was the unimaginable blessing of reading that book, Autobiography of a Yogi, and finding Master, because that's what Master stood for. He stood as a way shower, as pointing the way and saying, inward, search inside yourself. Figure out how to go deep inside. Follow these techniques, Hong Sa, Kriya, Om technique, energization exercises. And if you will follow those techniques, you will find that there is a reality inside yourself that you can explore, you can attune to, you can appreciate. And of course, in the beginning, like everybody else, my mind was like a flock of butterflies flying around in all different directions. And but my intention was good. My intention was pure. And there was the result that I did have. They were complete blessings because I really had no skill at meditation at that point. But I had a couple of experiences where, oh my gosh, there really is something inside of me. It was fleeting. It didn't last a long time, but it was enough to keep me motivated, enough to say, no, you're on the right track. Just keep trying. And yes, it's going to take a while to calm your mind down because you haven't practiced. You haven't practiced calming that. I had zero training in that. I spent most of my life, as a lot of you know, working with children. And that was one of the first things I wanted to do, was to give children a chance to know that they have that inner dimension before they hit adolescence, before they hit the teenage years. And so they'll have a point of comparison. They'll be able to say, okay, yes, all these things out here that I need to explore because I'm growing up, I'm 16 years old. I want to explore that, but I have a way to compare it with something else that I have inside of me. And then I can make my decisions accordingly. I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have any point of comparison. There was nothing, all there was these outward things. And it was extremely hollow and painful in a lot of ways. So maybe that's one of the reasons I wanted to devote my life that way. I wanted to see if more children could have that better perspective. But so this inner dimension, this inner experience is the cornerstone of everything Ananda's about. At one point, Swami's changed the name of Ananda at different times. At one point, we were called the Fellowship of Inner Communion, because that was trying to emphasize that was the message. It was also a time when Swami was trying to reach out to other churches in America, and he felt that would be a common ground. It wasn't particularly successful because a lot of people in the United States just weren't ready at that time. They're more so now. It's changing. The culture is changing for the better through a lot of pain and growth that way. But this idea of that inner communion is possible. So that was the whole first part of my discipleship, was cultivating this inner communion, having the great blessing like you have here today of Satsang, having other people around you with similar goals, helping you with that motivation to, yes, you can. It is possible to sit down daily for a while. Maybe at first it's only 5 minutes, but you'll see other people around you meditating for much longer than that. And all of a sudden you start to think, oh, well, maybe it's possible because I see these other people. I mean, I joined and I moved to Ananda in, when was it, July of 1972. And Christmas came up, 6 months later. And then what do we do at Ananda at Christmas? We have our 8-hour meditation. I was like, 8 hours? And it was like, that is, wow, what a huge challenge. But I went in, and there's all these people that I knew actually sitting down there too, with the idea that they were going to do it. I don't know what was going through their minds, but they're saying the same thing I was maybe thinking, oh, look over there, Nitai came. But it was, the support was priceless. And you found that I actually could. I can't say that first 8-hour meditation was all bliss and joy, but I did it. And then from that, of course, if I could do 8 hours, once in a while, I could do it. I bet I could do an hour a day, and then you grow into it. And as you grow, you cultivate that experience of that there is something inside of you, and that is the basis of worship. That finally, the word worship made sense to me. That worship means connecting to that inner experience which there are many, many different names for it, depending on what part of the world you come from. But everybody tries to label it. But we can call it Divine Mother. We can call it the Heavenly Father. And that worship, the real worship, is simply opening yourself to that reality and letting that reality step into your life. And just in that moment of your meditation, just saying, I'm just here. I'm a child of God, and all I have to do is open myself, my heart, my mind, and receive. Let God be in charge. Let God be in charge of my spiritual growth. So I'll be open, because God knows much better than I do what I need at this point. I might think I need this. I might think I need, I don't know, stronger concentration or something. And that might be true, but also maybe it's not true. But if I just open myself up, I will get the lessons I need, and I will be able to continue to grow. So finally, that idea of worshiping made sense to me. And reading today, it was the time will come, that now is. The true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. So the truth it's a real experience. I'm having this experience. It's true. I know that there's an inner dimension. And then the spirit part is, it's not a sensory experience. It's not an outward experience, an inner experience. It's a spiritual dimension. So it was cultivating that became a huge focus for me. Then I had this second blessing of getting to come and be around Swami Kriyananda, who had been on the path, 1970, about 25 years at that point. And plus the fact that he was a high soul already before he even connected with Master. But he knew so much more about what the spiritual path was all about. I, with pretty much everybody else at Ananda at that point, was a novice. And so you could think that the spiritual path, all the spiritual path is to meditate and cultivate that. But Swami didn't leave it at that. He said, no, there's much, much more. Because there is an outward dharma. There is an outward kind of action that is spiritually valid, spiritually important. And that is to share these teachings, to share this whole idea of Sanatana Dharma, this whole idea of internal and inner religion, and to help everyone find that. Because if we don't, a lot of people will be in ignorance. A lot of people will be in a lot of pain, and we can do our part, and however we're called to do this. And he did it with incredible energy. I mean, again, you might think of, okay, I'm a meditator. I'm a quiet person. I'm inward. But that wasn't who Swami was. Swami was this dynamo of energy. And he was always looking for the next way to share, the next project to work on, the next avenue of reaching out in a new way, whether it was books or music or photographs or obviously talks. He's thousands of talks over the years, and always, helping focus this. So Swami was my role model for the next step, is to bring this inner reality, this inner experience out into outer action. Now, it's tricky, because when you come out into the sensory world, the ego has a lot of fun there. The ego likes to get in there and this is mine, and and get out there and, hey, I'm pretty hot stuff, and all the different things that the ego does. So again, watching, and that could kind of deter you from wanting to go out there. You think, wow, why do I want to go out there? I'm just going to get all trip over my ego again. I don't want that. That's completely ridiculous. So maybe I won't act at all. I'll just be safe. I'll just stay in my house and not get in trouble. But that wasn't what Swami modeled for us. He was out there, right, the most dynamic person I have met in this lifetime. So to mix the two, inner communion, outer dynamism, Amazing challenge, but one that we're asked to do, because this is an age. This is a special age. This is the beginning of Dwapara Yuga, and Master came at the beginning of Dwapara Yuga to say this is a new dispensation, a new time. The patterns of the past were good for the past. During Kali Yuga, the world was so tamasic, rajasic, whatever you want to say, that it was basically impossible to be outward and not get caught up in your ego. So the path was find a convent, find a monastery, find a cave, and just forget about this whole world. Let the world mess itself up. And we read about all the things from the past couple thousand years, and it's pretty sad the way people have behaved on that time. And there was a good reason to leave it alone. But Master said, no. Now, things have changed. Now there's a chance. There's a chance to have a positive impact on our society. And that goes all the way back to Babaji with Lahiri, when he was having the transmission of Kriya Yoga, bringing Kriya Yoga out from the hidden times and telling Lahiri to share this. But even then, Babaji said share it only with renunciates. And Lahiri played his role and says, but sir, there's so many really special people who could make use of this, who are householders. Can't we also share this? And he says, so be it. The divine has spoken through you. That's a wonderful little play there to watch. So we've been called to a time when there is a chance. We can do things. We can start centers, which is now right in your laps. And I got to be at the new center yesterday for the little blessing for Swami's birthday or day before. And this is the beginning of a whole new chapter here, and with the idea that there can be all kinds of outreach here. It's just going to take all kinds of people being willing to come in and become part of this avenue. And I can tell you, there's, again, the first blessing of life for me was Master and the whole idea of intercommunion. The second blessing was Swami and the whole idea of outward service with a inner harmony, inner connection. So this part, it's not easy. It is fraught with challenges. If we have things from the past, where we, I guess ego, power, wealth, all these different challenges that come up when we're in the outward part, we're going to have to confront them. We're going to have to be able to learn, and we will learn. We will learn if we're sincere, because that's all that matters with God, is are you sincere? It doesn't matter about how much baggage you bring with you, because if you're sincere and steadfast, you'll go through the challenges. You'll see that experiences come your way that are just right for you to all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, there's that old ego guy again. And he just popped up. And he snuck in there when I wasn't looking. And I've got to admit it and say, yes, that's what's happening. But I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going. I like that saying, the Masters, a saint is a sinner who never gave up. Because if you think about it, it means that the inner saint that's there sees that sinner. He sees that sinner in his personality, in his outer way, but he's not devastated by it. He doesn't give up. He just says, oh, all right, that's the challenge. That's what I have to work through. So he'll keep going. And then with God's help, we gradually purify that, and we come out the other side. So this whole idea, this challenge of discipleship in this age, discipleship of Master, I guess that was another thing that I was so impressed with. Was Swami knew Master's power. He knew it when I came in the 70s. I had no understanding of that, but Swami was, here we had an incredibly simple lifestyle. We had 2 phones in the whole community. They didn't have mobiles in those days. We had 2 landlines in the whole community. There was everything was very, very simple. People living in Davie, who most of you know. Davie was living in a treehouse, but Swami would tell us, give us these little glimpses. Unfortunately, he didn't say too much. We would all died of fright. But that this is a worldwide work. Worldwide work? What? How could that possibly be? We can't even get to Nevada City, which is 15 miles away. But he knew that we were working with the power of an avatar. And that power was undefinable. It was beyond any limitations. All it was waiting was for us to grow up enough to be able to start to say, okay, all right, we can do this. I can't do it alone. I mean, I was given the job of teaching school. I had 6 students. We were in a renovated chicken coop. Talk about simple. We had no furniture. Our first project was to build chairs to sit in, so we'd have someplace to sit in. And so here's education for life, a worldwide work. And I look around and say, where? But here we are, 50 years later, and I'm stationed in Gurgaon now, and it is a worldwide work. It has the potential. That's a whole other talk I'll give some other time. But it has all this amazing potential because the young people of this age are ready for and need this deeper kind of education. The superficial education that we've developed over the last several hundred years is not enough. And we're seeing that breakdown in many ways. The old style of education doesn't fit the needs of the up-and-coming generation. So there's a lot to do. We all have a role to play. The way we can play it best is meditate regularly and as deeply as you can. Keep trying to cultivate that inner sense, that inner awareness, and then have the courage to try to bring that out into outward action so that when you're doing something, now at first it's easiest with simple things like sweeping. You know, to have a job as a sweeper and to be a devotee, what a blessing, because all you have to do is, and you can just keep that inner focus the whole time. If you're a doctor, it's a little harder because, oh my God, what's the blood sap going crazy, or this person, you know, but the challenge is exactly the same. Can you do whatever you're called to do, and can you do it with that inner vibration? Carry that with you so you're consciously in tune with that inner peace, no matter what you're doing, what you're called to do outwardly. And what we're called to do outwardly is the right thing for us because it's a challenge that is going to help us grow, and everyone has a different calling that way. So if we will do that, we will become the best devotees that we can be, and Master can work as much through us as possible. So I encourage us all to focus on that. Thank you.